everybody. I think as Professor mentioned, as I came in, I'm sorry my flight was delayed, that the best way to remember somebody is to continue our work and to ensure that the kind of work that is being done in the foundation is strengthened. Today is also International Women's Day, and I think in M.S.Swaminathan it's a good sign that half or more of this room comprises women. So I think not that that's enough, but I think we have to strengthen other forms of diversity as well, which since all the staff are present here, I'd like to mention we are not doing too well on our staff, diversity of our staff, and that's something that we should be conscious about. Now, I got roped in by Selvam to give this talk because I gave it a few weeks ago at the Youth Science Congress, and he said, please repeat it when you next come to Chennai. And so I'll just go ahead with it. Now, in this audience, and I think since one of the missions of the foundation is achieving food security through agriculture, I can actually go through this quite quickly. But I want to say a few things preliminary. Now, this definition of food security, I think all of you are very familiar with. I just want to identify the third sentence, all people. So, food security refers to all people, men, women, children. Food security is an individual concept. Ultimately, food security depends on the individual, though it requires certain provisions or strategies at global level, national level, state level, and household level. But we can't say we are nationally food secure but not individually food secure. That doesn't make sense, because ultimately food security has to be if all individuals are food secure, well nourished, adequate physical quantities, quality, safety, and so on. Having said that, I think it's also known that in most parts of the world, the actual burden of delivering food in families falls on women. So I think today, in the context of the Women's Day, it's important to remember that the burden, not necessarily out of choice, but the burden of ensuring food security for all individuals within a family, within the household context, is almost inevitably falling on women. And therefore, women's food security, when we talk about food security in women, it's not just making sure the woman is nourished, but ensuring that she has the resources and choices to make appropriate provisions for all members of the family without actually having to cut back on her own consumption or that of her daughter, say. Now, when we talk about food security in India, I'm going to actually, now I'm going to jump a bit. What are the national level policies in India to ensure food security at the individual level? And broadly, there have been two sets of policies, one on the production side and one on consumption. And I'm going to briefly deal with both, and particularly with some concerns regarding both of them. So I'll go quickly through what all of you already know. So, from the mid-60s, we have emphasis on food production, particularly on cereals production. And I think today, when we have 200 million tons of cereals, we forget the importance of that. There's a lot of attack on the Green Revolution, and we can't have 200 million tons of finger millets and minor cereals in this country. And I want to say this, although we are promoting Nutri-cereals, we've got to be practical. We need the major staples also. So I think we need the right balance. We shouldn't get swayed from one to the other. Green Revolution is criticized for only having focused on wheat and rice. Yes, but we are now focusing on other things, but let's not ignore wheat and rice. That is my the second very important part of the mid-60s was the setting up of institutions to deal with foods production, distribution, transport, storage. And we actually had three major institutions: the Commission on Agricultural Costs and Prices, it was then called the Agricultural Prices Commission, APC, the Food Corporation of India, and what was the third? Okay, it'll come back to me. So we had major institutions and the universalization of the PDS, sorry. All these three came together in the mid-60s. So actually there was a convergence in terms of policies of production, distribution, transport, storage and consumption during this period. Not that everything that was started was right or there are no problems with it, but I think it's important to remember because many of these institutions, including the Food Corporation of India, are under attack today. So I think we need to recognize the importance of that. Now, on the production front, let me just give you a few numbers. I think that here we have the rate of growth of, you can all read the numbers, right? I'm not repeating these numbers. Can you read the numbers in the last row? Anybody in the last row? Yes, you can read. Okay. So, we can see that broadly till 1991, period when economic liberalization started in India, the rate of growth of food grain production was higher than the rate of growth of population. So this Malthusian threat of not producing enough food for our population and that population growth would exceed it was kept at bay. But after 1991, we see very dramatic, I don't have the latest, this is sort of a slightly old slide, but it won't be very different if we look at if we bring it up to 2015 or 16. 1991 to 2010, you can see that the rate of food grain production is much less than our population growth, even though we are in demographic transition and population growth is slowing down and stabilizing. So I think this is something, as I said, we can't rest on the laurels of this, having certain food grain production levels and having buffer stocks and so on. Now, if we look at projections, let me turn to the projections. Around the turn of the century, there were a lot of projections for food grain demand in India around 2020. And now we're almost there, just 3 years away. So ranging from the lowest, Tim Dyson and Hanchete is 237 million tons, to the highest was GS Bhalla and others, 296 million tons. And let's take the midpoint, 269 million tons, 2020 requirement, and 2015-16 production is 253 million tons. So we need to be on our toes even on the production front, okay? And this food grain, of course, includes all cereals and pulses, okay? That's the definition of food grains. So let me skip this. Now, the crucial issue of the last, which has, I think, gained attention, I mean, this is just a summary of what what all of you know, so I'm not going through it. I think the crucial issue that has gained attention is, on the production side, is what's happening to the producers. What is the income of the farmers or the cultivators, and are they surviving? Are they going to be able to survive? If not, if they're all migrating to the cities, and we see increasing urbanization in Tamil Nadu, is in fact one of the most urbanized states in the country, then what is going to happen to that food grain production? It may not fall, there may be consolidation, but at least we need to be concerned about it. And so I think in addition to the strategy which focus only on production, we've got to take care of the producers themselves. And this means we have to look at the farmers' incomes. Now, India, as you know, has one of the best statistical systems in the developing countries and in the world, National Sample Survey and so on. But till 2002, there was no survey ever on farmers' incomes. 2002-03, about a decade ago, was the first ever, even pre or post independence survey on farmers' incomes. And the second one was a decade later in 2012-13. So, majority of our households in the country, in the rural areas, but there was no survey. And unfortunately, between the 2002-3 survey and the 12-13 survey, the definition of farmer has changed, the sampling strategy has changed, and the concept of income has changed. So I can, I don't want to go into that in this audience, but essentially we can't make any comparisons if everything from the definition of who is a farmer has changed. So again, I don't know who their advisors are, but anyway. Anyway, let's get to the bottom line. 2012-13, even though we cannot compare it with earlier, what does it tell us about farmers' income? Average monthly income was 6,000 rupees. And if we remove income from wages like NREG or any other kind of wages, it was only 4,300 something. So 4,300 rupees is the farmer's income, which I think I don't need to expand on, is obviously very, very low. And again, there's huge inequality. If you factor out Punjab, Haryana, Kerala, etc., then 17 states, the average income is less than 2,000 rupees, 1660. Okay, so we take Kerala because of the high value products that they are having, Punjab, Haryana because of more prosperous agriculture. Now, I'm just going to give you one table from the work of my student, Biplav Sarkar, who has taken data from these household surveys that I've been associated as well, and many of you know about, which we've now actually done 25 villages, not 22. And okay, I'm going to just give two tables from his analysis here. The first one is selection of about 8 villages. The important thing is the last column. The proportion of, we're talking about cultivator households here only, having negative incomes. In other words, losses. You invest in seed, you buy fertilizer, you spend on irrigation, and either crop fails or price crashes or there's a pest attack, something else, whatever. Now you can see that this number, 30% in Andhra Pradesh, this is Guntur district, a very irrigated, Bokacherla, Anantapur 35, UP 20, Kolhapur 20, Rajasthan, it's a dry village 40. So these are huge numbers. 20-40% of cultivators in the year in which we conducted the survey. So not every year, they're not making losses every year, but in the year we conducted the survey, 20% to 40% are making losses. There's only one village out of the 25 where there's no household with a loss, and that village is in Ganganagar district, Gang Canal, which is a irrigated area of Rajasthan. So the concern about incomes is not only about the average income, but the fact that it's hugely variable. Again, I think all of you who are working with households in different sites know that income fluctuates from year to year for so many reasons. Flood one year, drought one year, so many other things. The second, so we have to worry about stability of incomes as well as level of incomes. The second point from this data is, I'm going back now to this other table, the same villages, and I wanted to look at the first and the last column. The first column, of the numbers, the first column, like 5,706 rupees, that is the median income. In other words, the income of the 50th household, if we line up all the farmer households from lowest to highest income, the median value. That's 5,700 rupees per annum in Andhra Pradesh, in this Anantavaram village. Look at the last column, max. The highest income in the same village is 29 lakhs, 29.79 lakhs. And the same picture continues. Take the last village. This is, we surveyed in Gulbarga district of Karnataka, Jhapur village. 6,700 is the average income. This is quite a dry village. 15 lakhs is the highest income. And I'm talking only about income from agriculture. Not the richest person may have businesses, may have other things. We're not talking about that. We're talking about income from crop production, as if you can see from the title. So, of course it varies across things, but I don't have time for that today, and we can discuss that later. So what is the point here? The point here is that farming can be profitable. It is profitable. There are people making 15 lakhs, 7 lakhs. I mean, you just read the last column. 2 lakhs, 29 lakhs, 32 lakhs, and so on. So, farming can be profitable, but the average farmer who is a smallholder, who has all kinds of constraints, access to resources, access to credit, access to good irrigation water, access to markets, access to storage so that you don't have to sell the crop immediately at a low price, and so on. We can go on, and in each of the places you're working in, the factors will be different, but the point is that the average farmer is getting less than 1/10 of what is feasible for those who have the power of scale. So I think this is the bottom line emerging here, that it's not that farming is not viable and that farming and agriculture needs to be given up. I don't think we'll all be surviving if agriculture is given up in the world or in India, but how to ensure that those with the 6,000 rupee can at least, the government of India only wants to double it. I think that's still very low. Who can get somewhere towards the 15 lakhs, if not in 1 year, but over time. Okay. So I've already made this point that the issue today is not just of production or productivity, but of ensuring that small and marginal farmers can generate enough income, not just from crop production, but also from crop production. Okay, now price policy, etc. I'm going to skip this. Okay, I'll just say a word on this. Now, all of you know these issues that this is the prices of inputs. They're going up, and the minimum support prices are not going up as rapidly, and therefore you have the classical, what used to be called in economics, price scissors, that the farmer is squeezed from both ends. Prices of inputs are rising very rapidly, prices of output are not keeping up, so you are in this squeeze, this pencil-like squeeze. And of course, as all of you again know, National Commission on Farmers, one of the major recommendations has been on ensuring a reasonable price. The minimum support price to be C2 plus 50%. Now, let me again just take you back to the villages here that I was talking about. And this is the minimum support price for paddy in that year and the actual farm harvest price from our survey and the deviation. Again, the values don't matter. You see all the reds. In all the villages where it's red, the average price the farmer is getting is less than the minimum support price. So we're not even talking about how to raise the minimum support price. Even the announced minimum support price is not reaching the average farmer. And the only exceptions, as you'll see, is the two villages in Punjab. Okay, Punjab and Western Uttar Pradesh. So Punjab, Western Uttar Pradesh and Andhra, that is Guntur district, in these few pockets you have, as we all know, MSP works, but in rest of the countries, Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, except Bihar, it is not working. So again, I won't belabor this point because you're all familiar with it, but I think we need to be aware that in order to ensure individual food security on the production front, we are not in a situation of surplus, as some commentators would like us to believe. We are in a situation where we don't have adequate food production as per the many projections that have been made, number one. Number two, the producers themselves are either making losses or the majority of them are barely earning enough. 4,000 rupees a month is not enough to survive on. So we really need to address the problem of ensuring higher income. And I think that is actually the mandate of many of the programs here. ensuring higher incomes through access to inputs, either collective forms or through better access to markets, banks and so on. Okay. I'm not going to go into the budget and all that. Okay. Let me turn now to the consumer end. Okay, there are other things which, if you're interested in, we can discuss later. Now come to the, so how are the consumers, how are the individuals faring in terms of food, and as you all know, food and nutrition security is now discussed together. Now, again, for some of you in this audience, this is very familiar. This is from a couple of years ago. I think it's a Human Development Report. But I think the numbers have not changed very much. I put China as number one because for some reason, newspapers think we should compare ourselves with China. I think we're nowhere in any indicator comparable with China today. But let's look at nutrition. Moderate and severe stunting is 9%. It's 38% in India. Probably the latest NFHS, it's come down a bit. Severe underweight is 3%. It's 29% in India. And Ghana, Angola, Nigeria, some of the countries we like to think as very backward compared to India, are doing much better on indicators of nutrition. So from the point of view of individual food and nutrition security as well, I'll skip this. We're not doing well at all. Now, obviously, in this one lecture, I'm not going to deal with what and how to address. That's a big research agenda. Obviously, there are multiple reasons why we see these high levels of food and nutrition insecurity. Now, what I would like to turn to is the policy part. Since I talked about, even on the production front, on the policy part and the need for institutional support to ensure adequate production. Now, on the consumption side, in the policy arena, the major program that I'm going to talk about, and which is the largest program in India, is the public distribution system or the ration system. There are also many other food and nutrition programs like school meals, ICDS and so on. I'm not going to really talk about that. And even here, I want to just skip forward to the present and what are the issues of concern to us today. So you all know that the targeting PDS was introduced in 96, 97, and that there were huge errors of targeting. There are two types of errors. When you try to target narrowly, of course it wasn't done in Tamil Nadu, so we don't have the same kind of problem here. You have that the poor are excluded, and then of course if you have a wider net, the non-poor are included. Now, there's just one question I want to raise on this, because many of you work in this area and are reading and reviewing papers on the public distribution system. If you look at 99% of the literature in India, I'm not talking about internationally, on the public distribution system, they're only focused on error number 2. There's leakage. The number 1. There's leakage. Even this year's economic survey. The number of non-poor getting LPG, number of non-poor getting PDS, number of non-poor getting this, that and the other. I'm looking only at nutrition, not at other things. Yes, let us find out how many non-poor are getting it. What is the cost to society if the non-poor get free ration? Okay, if one of you in this room takes home 5 kilos free ration, what is the cost to society? The only cost is the financial cost. That was worth 50 rupees and you've got it for 0 or whatever. But what is the second error? The second error is of excluding the poor. Suppose we do very fine targeting, you don't have Aadhaar, you're not going to get it, this, that and the other. If we exclude the poor, what is the cost to society? Now I want that answer from the room, because this is a very knowledgeable audience. Any guesses? What is the cost to society of the error of excluding the poor, whether it's PDS or any other scheme? Not that PDS is the greatest scheme ever, but so are the two errors equivalent? This is where I am. One is a financial cost. Yes, if somebody takes home 50 rupee bag for free, for zero, charge them a tax, get that money back in some way. What is the cost of excluding the poor? Sorry? I want to stop the lecture because I want the answer here. It's a very easy answer, actually it's obvious, but anyway. Yeah. No, what is the cost? What is the cost? I'm not asking to calculate in some rupees or something.
Basically, you lose on your human development. Basically, the children on health and nutrition.
Yeah, it's a cost on the individual. The individual is malnourished, the individual is ill, if it's a woman, the next generation has low birth weight, you carry it on, person doesn't develop to full cognitive capacity, and so on. The list is long. So it's a huge cost. It's the cost of disabilities later in life. We know that people who are malnourished are now more susceptible to lifestyle diseases later in life. It's a cost to the healthcare system. It's a cost to labor productivity. A malnourished person is not going to be able to produce the same output efficiently or whatever we call it. So it's a cost to a huge number of things. And because it's a cost which is not quantifiable in rupees, the other one I could say 50 rupees and finish it off. Because it's not a cost which is quantified, it is ignored. And this is a very important point, and I hope all of you, when you go back and you're studying any issue, you're going to look at this. You can take anybody from IFPRI to anybody else. This cost is not mentioned. Why? Because it's so difficult to put a number on it. What are you going to cost? Cost of future health insurance, cost of future hospital care for malnourished people, cost of future generations having low birth weight. How will you value these? It's very difficult. There are very few calculations. And there's some very approximate calculations. So because it's not a factor that can be calculated, it's ignored, and again and again and again, unfortunately, it's my tribe of economists in India only looking at non-poor because it's very easy. 10% of income taxpayers get a subsidy, 10 multiplied by 500 rupees, that's the cost to society, to the exchequer, and so on. But that's also the easiest cost to get back. You know who these 50 people are who are non-poor, who got the benefit. Tax them. Put some other charge on them. You can get it back. So it's the easiest thing to do. But that's the one with all our energies of all journalists, academics. I mean, with a few exceptions, I'm not talking about the few, exceptions in India, majority of people. So I think this is a very, very important point because all the reforms to the public distribution system in the last 20 years are only, and I repeat, only motivated by reducing error of wrong inclusion. So we're dealing with the wrong thing. If you're attacking the wrong problem, solutions cannot be right. Go to cash, do this, do that. Every scheme that of improvement, or so-called improvement, which has been recommended in the last 20 years, is only motivated by reducing the size of the food subsidy and reducing the number of non-poor. And unfortunately, this has a lot of costs. So here is the answers, which I wasn't showing you. We'll skip that. Okay, so, and just one example. Who are the kind of people who get excluded? In Orissa, which MSSRF, Food Security Atlas said is one of the most food insecure states, 1/3 of households did not even have the ration card. So these are the ones who are excluded, who are facing all these costs, and we're not even counting those costs or discussing those costs. Okay, I have many slides on this, which I'm going to skip. Okay. Okay, I won't take too much longer. Salma, how long? 1 hour. Oh, it lost me. No, I'm going to just take 5-10 minutes and then we can have some discussion. Now, the food security, the PDS in India, is one of the largest in the world. But in terms of the people covered, 237 million ration cards, 737 million persons, 500,000 fair price shops. In terms of the grain distributed, 50 plus million tons. But, this is the catch here, in terms of financial outlay, sorry, this slide was for a presentation in Oxford. Sorry, Prakashiti, you're seeing this again. But in terms of the financial allocation, the Indian program is nothing compared to the US food stamp program. The United States has the biggest food security program in the world, about $74 billion, 46 million people, so about one in, just after the 2008 financial crisis, it was 1 in 6 people in the US were on food stamps. So the United States, 1 in 6 people were considered eligible for food security, and in India we wanted to be, I don't know what, 1 in, preferably nobody, but a 1 in 2 or something. Okay. So I think when we are talking about the public distribution system in India, there are lots of issues of nitty-gritty, there are lots of things we need to look at, but I'm focusing today on the financial allocation, since that's a very big issue. So roughly 30% of the Indian population is malnourished. Okay, these numbers, you can add or subtract a bit, but roughly 30% is malnourished. According to the National Food Security Act, 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban, so that roughly works out to about 800 million persons. These are very rough calculations I've done, or 2/3 of the Indian population should be eligible for food security. And the third indicator I like to use is the food share criterion. Let's take the criterion used by the United States to identify who should be eligible for food security. And the criterion they use is very simple. If your total monthly budget expenditure, if in your total monthly spending, more than 1/3 is spent on food. It's very simple. Total monthly expenditure, more than 1/3, you should have this. If we take that criterion, about 1100 million, that is 1.1 billion people in India, would be eligible for food security. They're not all malnourished, obviously not, but they're eligible for having some support, some food security support. So 363 million actually are malnourished, 860 or 800 million as per NFSA, and 1100 million as per the US criterion. This is how the US criterion works. These numbers are not. Okay, let's take the Chinese criterion, since we like to compare ourselves with China. In China, the criterion is more than 50% of your budget should be spent on food. So just imagine, there's a worker who is a daily earner who spends more than 50% on food. Why is this household food insecure? Suppose that worker falls ill for 10 days. Your income's gone, so that what happens to your food budget is going to be affected. So one medical illness, one person getting unemployed, any other kind of emergency in the family, and your food budget is affected. You may not be malnourished to begin with, but your food budget will be affected. So if you take such households, then we get about 850 million people. So using the Chinese criterion, about 850 million people in India are eligible for food security, and this is actually exactly the number the NFSA has come up with, 800 million. So it is kind of corresponding with the NFSA. Okay, so this is how we actually get those calculations, which I'll leave out. So now the question is, 800 million people at least, let's say by NFSA, require some kind of food security program. What is the food subsidy that the Indian government is spending? The first column is the food subsidy, and this doesn't include the additional state subsidy like states like Tamil Nadu are spending. This is just the central budget. Central budget food subsidy is for 2017-18 145,000 crores. It was 134,000 crores last year, and so on. So that sounds huge, 145,000 crores. But let's look at the last column, which is the share of, I couldn't do it for the last year, but the share of food subsidy in GDP, in our national income. Share of food subsidy in GDP has never, barely crossed 1%. And I have the calculations in my book for the last 50 years, and it's never more than 1%. So what are we saying? 800 million people, that is 2/3 of the population, require food security, but we can't spend even 1% of GDP when it's spent. There are a whole lot of articles and advisors and policymakers and economists and government people saying, no, PDS, we're spending too much, 145,000 crore, that's ridiculously high, let's prune it. So question is not the 145,000 crores, obviously we can't look at absolute numbers in a country like ours, but for 66% of the population, basic food security is 1% of the GDP too much. If you ask me, it's actually too little. And if you look at Sri Lanka, if you look at so many other countries, Ghana, I keep doing these calculations, but then I've got tired of doing them now. It's much higher, let alone the US, we can look at the ratio of that food stamp program in the government budget and so on. So the point is that I think we've been addressing, as far as consumers are concerned, we're not addressing how to get the most nutritious food through PDS to the people, but we're addressing how to convert it to cash, how to target it, and so on. Okay? So I'm not going to go into some of these things. So I think that giving the cash transfer is the last solution which has come on board, and it's probably the worst. For two sets of reasons, and with this I'll end what these reasons are. One is as far as the consumers are concerned. So instead of ensuring that the quality of food is good, that the quantity is adequate, that the coverage is good, that in addition to rice and wheat, you give whatever else grain you can, you give pulses. So instead of addressing the problems of malnutrition through PDS, we're trying to give cash and say, just go to the market and buy. And for most people, the market in rural areas is that one village store. It's not like you have choice of 10 supermarkets to go to. Go and buy at whatever price, whatever you can. And we're not going to ensure better food and nutrition security through that. There's a lot of writing on this. I'm not going to deal with that. The second implication of this, which I think I want to stress, because again that's not mentioned much in the discussion, what happens if you do cash transfers? Then you don't need the Food Corporation of India. So actually it's a means to close down the institutions that were set up in the 1960s. Because why should you buy grain? Why should you store it? Why should you transport it? You can give farmers also a minimum support price, which is being tried on an experimental basis, I believe, in Madhya Pradesh. You don't buy, no procurement. You just give the difference between market price and MSP in cash or check. Now not cash, sorry, check to the farmer. So you can pay the farmers in cash, check, and you can give consumers checks or whatever, bank transfers, and you can just do away with Agricultural Prices Commission and Food Corporation of India, and then 5 years down the road you will have to rely on the United States, not on the government of the United States as we did in the time of PL 480. You'll have to rely on the Chicago commodities market, futures trading, to buy the grain. So I think that the question of cash transfers, I'm not talking about cash transfer for some other scheme, but I'm talking about cash transfers for food-related programs and food-related programs. Okay, whether for LPG subsidy it's better to give the cash or not, I think that's a different issue. I'm not dealing with that. Cash subsidy in lieu of food transfers is going to be extremely harmful for the consumers, for the food and nutrition security, which is our ultimate concern, but also for the entire institutional structure, which is the basis for national food security in India. And I think, unfortunately, what will happen with many of these things is we'll realize only a little too late. Once these institutions have been dismantled, 10 years down the road, then there'll be people, it's no fun. I don't want to be there saying, I told you so, because it's the harm to society and people. Okay, so let me conclude now that, Oops. Oh, that is a. Okay. Slides have closed on their own. Okay, so let me conclude by saying that on the production front, in terms of national food production, while there have been huge leaps and bounds, the two concerns now are on maintaining productivity increases, and in the context of climate change and future challenges which are going to come and affect the possible productivity increases, as well as ensuring the incomes of those producers. Okay, ensuring that those who remain, not necessarily everybody will remain in farming, but that those who remain are able to earn a reasonable, decent income. The second set of issues is to do with the consumers, because as I said, ultimately food security is for the individuals. And the main policy here, the government of India focused on that today. The public distribution system is very heavily under attack from people on account of those who feel that it is costing too much, that there's too much leakage going to the non-poor, and who are trying in various ways to actually close the thing down by converting it into cash. Once it becomes cash transfer, we don't need to call it public distribution of food. It's just cash transfer to the household for whatever. We can do a lot of cash transfers. I'm not against cash transfers, but it's no longer would come under the ambit of food security issues, and we'd no longer be discussing it here. So, friends, I think that I'd like you to have some questions and comments now. Oh, thank you. Any questions on that?
Just a continuation on this cash versus time issue. I've written this piece on the universal basic income and the dangers it's being looked at in lieu of the social safety nets. If you could talk a little bit about that.
What, one more lecture? Bhavani, this is not fair. You want me to now give another talk. Okay. See, the idea of universal basic income is totally different. It's not what we're talking about here, cash transfer in order to buy food, etc. It's a concept that is being discussed in Europe and being tried in a few countries like Finland. It's really countries which are so advanced as Finland is. I can tell you, I've lived in Finland, so I know, where public education, and starting from the nursery, I know I have friends who were so disappointed they couldn't get their child into the public nursery, they had to go to the private nursery. Because it's not just the paying for it, everything about the public nursery is better. So starting from nursery to healthcare to whatever, to pensions, to care for old age, and so on. So in a society like that, now they are saying that, can we ensure that there are people who fall through gaps? Somebody gets unemployed, doesn't register, somebody has... So can we plug that gap by giving a minimum income to everybody? Okay, so let's say, I think 500 euros a month or something like that is the Finnish, a Finnish proposal. Now that is, if our country can afford that, I've done the calculation, it has to be 510,000 crores at least if we want to give the NREGA 100 days income to everybody. Excellent, I'm for it. So everybody knows that if something happens, if for whatever reason you're in a contract job and 1 month you have a family crisis, you can't go to work, doesn't matter, you'll get that 5,000 rupees at least in your bank account. But to do that, you have to raise resources through taxation. You can't take away money from PDS, from maternity benefit, from LPG subsidy, which is what the economic survey has listed, a whole lot of subsidies, from scholarships to students, etc. It's nothing to do with that. It's not for education. Minimum income is not for health, it's not for education, it's not for nutrition. After those things are taken care of, so once everybody has access to adequate education, health care, nutrition, It's a flow to allow a person to live a dignified life, that if there is a problem, and there are people, for example, in Finland, I don't know about now, but the major social problem there was alcoholism. So if there are, and they're usually single men or single women, also many women without families, someone doesn't fall off who may fall off the social service net. It's to ensure a minimum income. Or it's a young person who's looking for a job, doesn't want to take money from their parents, doesn't want to live with the parents. You can, you don't have to tell your friends that you're eating out of your parents' home. You get a minimum income. So that's the kind of universal basic income idea is a very good idea. It's for societies at much higher levels of income which have advanced in terms of having taken care of health, nutrition, education, employment insurance, disability, etc. Everything. After that, you're giving an additional income. So I think that again in India, why it is being discussed, I can't understand. I mean, we're not at that level of income, or we're not a society where we've taken care of all health, education, nutrition problems. So the only answer can be that it is a way to do what I have said, that okay, the headache of running the PDS, headache of running government schools, headache of running public health clinics, let's do away with everything. Let's give people 2,000 rupees in their pocket, and then they can go to whichever healthcare, education, store, food store they want. So I think that's it's not explicitly written like that, but I can't think of what else can be the reasoning, because we're obviously not like Finland. We're in no way comparable to Finland right now. I don't know if that answers your point. Yes.
What could be the ideal percentage of GDP if we spend on our, strengthening our public distribution system, so that we can really reach out to those who are really in need of it, and to some extent achieve this food security and nutrition security?
Good question. I had done a calculation, but that was now almost 15 years ago. That was only for cereals. But I think this could be something easily done. What is the cereals, pulses? Let's make a basket. If this minimum basket of food, what would be the cost of it to be provided to 800 million persons? And then you can just multiply it and you can see. It will definitely be more than we are spending. But for only cereals, I remember, I'm trying to remember, I think the calculation was, about double that, 2 or 3% of GDP. 2%, yeah. So it's not going to be much more. Huh? For universal PDS is 2%, but now not PDS. We are saying add oil, add pulses, add a few more things to the, what you're giving. It'll obviously go up, but won't be more than 4 or 5% of GDP. That's but it's worth doing. I think the calculation.
Yeah, I raise this because, see, for example, the more money we are going to put in there, in turn it is going to be distributed to the producer in a way or other.
Yes.
So it will also strengthen the other systems that are going to contribute the strengthening of the public distribution system. So if we see how it is going to proliferate, that will be interesting.
No, I agree.
I thought since it is Women's Day, I will just add a point to what Madhura's excellent analysis. She has covered very thoroughly all aspects of PDS, implications of targeted PDS and so on. But in the Act, the Food Security Act, it clearly says that the eldest woman in the household will hold the entitlement card. In other words, so long as it's going to be food, it is likely to go to the family. Unless there is a modification of the Act, instead of food you give cash, that also has to go to the eldest woman. Now there will be conflicts on the interest or the use of the money in the family. There is obviously the man may have some other ideas and so on. The other point is the Act provides special attention to the first 1,000 days of a child's life. It's a whole life cycle approach, and the first 1,000 days, again, this can be done only through the woman in the household. If just some money is given, we don't know whether the first 1,000, the 3-year-old child is going to get somebody else. Therefore, there are very deep gender dimensions in the present act. And what is important when we discuss PDS and so on, it's essentially important that the grains go for the purpose for which they are intended, namely nutrition security.
The main point that I would like to say is that to solve such a kind of larger problem like food and nutrition security, that we have to hear the perspectives of professionals from different backgrounds. We normally used to hear from the crop scientists and sometimes from the biotechnology, the breeders, mostly from the agricultural scientists. We used to get points. So I think that we have to get ideas from many other professionals with the different backgrounds, and also we feel that we have to get a lot of ideas from the biochemists also. It seems the absorption of nutrients seems to be not well understood, in my opinion. That is whatever the presentation I heard. So that it clearly indicates that if you want to show some good models on how to solve food and nutrition security, that MSRF has the biggest opportunity of developing the pan-MSRF project. Without that, I think that it cannot be solved. See, but I am seeing that the Food Security Group, Lansa Group, Eco Technology Group, they are all working in, at least now you understand that how we have to come together and develop a big, larger pan-MSRF project, and we can get a lot of ideas from your presentation on how we have to prepare the proposals. Otherwise, our proposals are always more biased towards production. The other sides are not at all seen. So I feel that we can take some lessons and we will prepare a very good proposal, pan-MSRF proposal, and implement it in some larger areas and show some good models. That's what I am trying to say. That's what I thought when you presented there in Mumbai. I thought that you have to talk to our people also. But I still feel that where there you presented much more, you explained many things in a much more clear way. That's also, professor also used to do the same thing, that he used to make very good presentation outside MSR. Once I told the professor also. So I feel that it's good that we can hear more. Thank you.
But I just wanted to have your opinion about, this 100 rupees per day which is given if, people don't have work. I find that I come from the construction industry, and I find that it is becoming very difficult to get labor because, people have this dole and then they are very content and then they don't want to work anymore. So that is something that needs to be taken care of as well. Yes, NRE.
So I think the fact of the matter is that
if you look at careful data on rural India at least, average adult is unemployed for more than 100 days, more than 150, 200 days of the year. So that was the motivation for NREG, that it will give 100 days per household, not even per worker. The demand actually was per worker, but I remember these debates in the common minimum program of UPA, it got diluted to per household. So originally the demand was per worker. 100 days per household at a minimum wage. Now, I think that has been effective in the sense it's pushing up wages. It is making labor scarce, which means labor wages will be pushed up, which is what we need. Because at current wages, even if people work 300 days, they are not going to get the poverty income. So I think that we have to, if there are jobs available which pay more, which are more skilled, then definitely the worker will not want to just sit with 100 rupees and the NREGA work, which is actually in most cases very heartbreaking, hard labor also. But I think that this is a comment which comes from many people, including these big farmers, etc. We are not getting workers, we're not getting workers. Well, pay them more, they'll come, skill them. So I think that's the answer I would give.
இப்போ இந்த டாபிக் தான் இந்த 100 நாள் வேலை திட்டத்தால் வந்து அதே சொன்னது விவசாயிகளுக்கும் அதே பிரச்சனை இருக்குது. ஆனால் நீங்கள் மேபி வந்து இப்போ ஒரு பிஸ்னஸ் நடத்துகிறவங்க வந்து பார்த்தீங்கன்னா மேபி ரைஸ் த சேலரி ஈஸிலி பேஸ்ட் ஆன் த ப்ராஜெக்ட் அவங்க வந்து ரைஸ் பண்ணி அவங்கள வர வைக்க வாய்ப்பு இருக்குது. ஆனால் விவசாயத்தில் வந்து பார்த்தீங்கன்னா அது வந்து ஏற்கனவே வந்து நாங்கள் வந்து அதில் ஓரளவு சிறு விவசாயிகள் ஃபுல்லாக லாஸ்ட்டில் தான் போயிட்டுருக்காங்க. அப்போ இன்னமும் வந்து இந்த மாதிரி இருக்கிறது வந்து பார்த்தீங்கன்னா மேலும் பிரச்சனையாக தான் ஆகுது. இந்த மாதிரி திட்டங்கள் எங்கே தேவைப்படும்னா எந்த இடத்த அதிகமாக பாதிக்கப்பட்டிருக்காங்க மக்கள் அந்த இடத்த மட்டும் கொடுத்துருக்கலாம். பட் ஆனால் மற்ற இடத்த போராடுவாங்க பிரச்சனை வரும் அப்படின்றதுக்காக ஓவரால் நேஷனல் ஃபுல்லாக கொடுத்தது இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு பிரச்சனையும் எடுத்து போகுது. இது வந்து சின்ன பிரச்சனை கிடையாது. இப்போ மேஜர் சோர்ஸ் எங்கே இருந்தோம்னா நம்ம எல்லாரும் வந்து சாப்பாடு இல்லாமல் இருக்க முடியாது. சாப்பாட்டுக்கு மிக முக்கியமானது வந்து பார்த்திங்கன்னா அக்ரிகல்ச்சர். இப்போ அங்கே வந்து பெரிய விவசாயிகளுக்கு இருக்கிற அளவு அதை விட சிறு விவசாயிகளும் ரொம்ப அதிகம். லாபத்தை சம்பாதிக்கிறது பெரிய விவசாயிகள் கொஞ்சம் ஈஸியாக சம்பாதிச்சிட முடியும். ஆனால் சிறு விவசாயி லாபம் சம்பாதிச்சு ரொம்ப கஷ்டம். அப்படி இருக்கக்குள்ள இந்த பாதிப்பும் பார்த்திங்கன்னா இவங்களுக்கு தான் வருது. அப்போ என்ன பண்ணுவாங்கன்னா அதில் வந்து வெளியே வர பார்ப்பாங்க. அப்போ ஆட்டோமேட்டிக்காக என்ன ஆகும், வெளியே வந்தாங்கன்னா ப்ரொடக்ஷன் கம்மியாகும். ப்ரொடக்ஷன் கம்மியாச்சுன்னா என்ன ஆகும், அந்த ஃபுட்டினுடைய விலை ஏற பார்ப்போம். அது யார் மேலே வந்து சேரும், நம்ம மேலே தான் வந்து சேரும். அப்போ ஒரு திட்டத்தை கொண்டு வரக்குள்ள வந்து பார்த்தீங்கன்னா அது ப்ளஸ், அது எல்லா திட்டத்துலேயும் ப்ளஸ் இருக்கும், எல்லா திட்டத்துலேயும் மைனஸ் இருக்கும். பட் அது எங்கே ப்ளஸ்ஸாக இருக்குதோ அங்கே இருந்துதான் நல்லா இருந்திருக்கும். எங்கே மைனஸாக இருக்குதோ அந்த இடத்த கொஞ்சம் அட்லீஸ்ட் அதை கம்மியாக்கியோ இல்லைனா வந்து அதுக்குரிய விஷயங்களை பண்ணியிருந்தா நல்லா இருந்திருக்கும் நான் ஃபீல் பண்ணுறேன்.
NREGA we have to discuss separately. It's a big policy issue. But one point you have raised is very correct. We are also finding it. Small farmers are also hiring in labor. So it's not just the big farmers. So just giving one answer there, because I think at least in the urban answer is increased wages. India has one of the lowest wages. But in the rural areas, why? Because rain has come, sowing has to be finished in a day. So small farmers also are hiring labor. They're not just using their family labor. So they are also facing the higher wage rate if the wage rate in the market has gone up. At the same time, we are finding many of the small farmers, they are going for NREGA labor also. So it's a very complex situation. People are employing their own family labor. They're working as wage workers with NREGA to supplement. So see, the NREGA wage is supplementing the income of that small producer. If you saw that table from Situation Assessment Survey, 6,000 rupees per annum was the 6,000 rupees per month, was the income of the average farmer. Only 4,000 was from crop production, 2,000 was from wages. So small farmers also working in NREGA, also complaining about. So it's a very complex. In India, I think because people are just, and I think the reason it's so complex, the basic reason is that because people are just surviving. See, so you have to do a little bit of hiring out of your own labor in NREGA. You have to pay the higher wage for the worker on the, if the wages have gone up. So it's a very complex thing, but I think the core of it is that it's the risk and low level of income, where everybody is managing. So I agree. Small farmers also are, there are issues there. We can't, ignore them, but we have to look at the whole context of that particular, region, and then see how, incomes can be raised for all people. Workers have to get higher incomes. Small producers also have to be able to overcome that labor cost. So it's a complex answer. I think it's not easy. But I think thank you for that. Okay. I think we'll wind up now.